Hello everybody, greetings from Galway Cycling Campaign. You're all very welcome to this evening's discussion about MOTHERLOAD, the movie directed by Liz Canning. Hope you've all enjoyed our online virtual screening of MOTHERLOAD, a fantastic documentary. We're going to just wait 90 seconds or so to allow people a time to come in and settle in, and maybe with a cup of tea before we have a chat with our panelists. So if you want to take another 60 seconds, sit back and relax, and we'll begin the proceedings formally in about 90 seconds time. Just to say, you're all very welcome to use the chat facility. Please introduce yourselves, tell us your name, where you're from, what you're interested in, what inspired you about MOTHERLOAD, maybe share your Twitter handle or your website. You can put questions into the Q&A. We really warmly welcome that. We'll ask the questions of our panelists. And also please feel free to have a conversation in the chat amongst ourselves. Thanks very much. So we'll start in about 60 seconds time. Hi folks, as you're coming in, we're just going to wait another 30 seconds or so to allow everybody to settle in before we begin tonight's Q&A and discussion. Thanks very much. Right, I think we'll begin. Hello everybody, and welcome to this finale event of Bike Week 2020, brought to you by Galway Cycling Campaign. I'm your host, Martina, Callanan. I'm Deputy Chair of the Galway Cycling Campaign, and we are delighted this evening to bring you a fabulous Q&A with Director Extraordinaire of MOTHERLOAD, Liz Canning. Liz is joining us all the way from California with her lovely dog, Boy. How's it going? Delighted to have you here joining us on the west coast of Ireland. With Liz, our three guest speakers are on our panel. Neasa Bheilbigh, a primary school teacher here in Galway, co-founder of the Galway School Cycle Bus. Síle, co-founder of Better Ennis, and Joe Sachs-Elderidge from the Leitrim Cycling Festival. So this evening we're going to pretend we're in the pub. We have to really remember what it's like to be in the pub after watching such a terrific film. The conversation on Twitter, I think the key, if there was to be a key word coming out of conversations, it's the word inspirational. People are just so enlivened and heart-filled and brimming with excitement after seeing a glorious 90 minutes of MOTHERLOAD, the movie. Liz, thank you so much for making this film for us. We're absolutely thrilled now to have the opportunity to chat to you about it. And I guess one of the things that really stands out for us as all of us here on the panel, our panel guest speakers, we're all everyday cycling activists. We love to cycle our bike. We are involved here in Ireland with trying to advocate for safer road facilities, better road legislation, all to do the simple, joyous act of riding her bike to work, to school, to shops, to go see friends. And this is something that your film captures so beautifully. So Liz, can you tell us a little bit about how, what for you making the mundane extraordinary is about?
You know, I sort of tell the story in the film of how I came to be an everyday cyclist. So for me, I guess when I became a mom, I was quite shocked at how much just mundane labor, cleaning, errands there was. I mean, even though people prepared me and say, you're going to have twins, it's going to be really hard, I was not prepared for how exhausted I was. And the fact that I could turn, you know, an errand in which most people would assume I'd be buckling my kids into a metal box into an adventure where we were basically exploring our community and reacting to things, like interacting constantly with the people and the environment. And that was really revolutionary for me, and obviously for a lot of characters in the film. And then come to find out through making the film that this is something that we crave as human beings. Like this is in our DNA. That was really exciting for me, because I'd always wondered why I needed it so badly, because I really had, ever since I was a teenager, needed this experience of riding my bicycle every day. So that was really satisfying to discover that it's a very natural thing that we need to pay more attention to.
Absolutely. I think I see nodding heads here. Síle, Ginnane, co-founder of Better Ennis and chartered physiotherapist, you, I think, really relate to the idea of movement being a key part of your everyday experience.
Yeah, and I suppose health isn't just physical health, you know, it's physical health, mental health, social health, and that movement in public space, as Liz was saying, you're not cut off by a metal box, allows people to socially interact. And it's not necessarily that you have to stop and talk or, you know, stop and, you know, interact with the people, but the simple act of seeing other people is very healthy. And I think especially when we look at the growth in urban centres and how people will migrate even more to cities, it's even more important. So that we can see people that are different to ourselves and that we're more likely to be, can build up a sense of community, build up a sense of social cohesion. And there was actually a really good article today in one of the papers, and it talked about how that social isolation can very often be exploited by, wasn't expecting to go into this, by right-wing political parties. And it's really important, and of course that's enhanced by, you know, online and social media, but that real world interaction with each other, I think, can really help break down a sense of people are different to us. Actually, everyone's just trying to get around their normal daily lives. And if we can see people who look different to us, or different ages, or different abilities, different genders, different ethnicities, different socioeconomic backgrounds, if we see different people and interact, we have a much better chance of saying, actually, you know, we're just all in this together.
And now, Neasa, this theme of movement and social interaction and valuing and celebrating difference, I think that might resonate quite strong with you as a young mum, as a primary school teacher, and as co-founder of the Galway School Cycle Bus.
Yeah, I think I knew it anyway, like that the impact of being able to cycle and what it had on the children on the cycle bus. So them interacting with each other, interacting in their community, interacting with their surroundings, just, you know, the whole sensory thing of being on a bicycle on their way to school, rather than, okay, there's probably people here who'd have to drive their kids to school, grand, that's fine. But if you can cycle your children to school, just the impact. And because I was working with children one-to-one or in small groups as well, when the first year or two the cycle bus was founded, a lot of the children were actually, I was working with them on a daily basis, and I could see the difference in them if they had cycled to school that morning or if they hadn't. Their focus, their mood, everything was different. And that was across all the children with additional needs. There was no negative to it. And then I suppose when a second baby came along, that was like, she was about 5 months when lockdown happened. And when lockdown happened, that was the first time I kind of had the confidence even to go out with my toddler on the bike. So I had him on the seat on the back of the bicycle. And because traffic was low, I kind of built up a little bit of confidence cycling around the place with him on the back. And then I was like, right, how am I going to get, like, I was loving it. I was out again on the bicycle with him. And I was, and that kind of, again, the sensory thing, like cycling up a road and he's talking about the flowers and he's talking about a pheasant off in a field or whatever and chatting away to each other. And I was like, how am I going to do this with two? Especially with the hills and stuff around Knocknacarra. And I had it in the back of my mind, the whole cargo bike thing. And I'd seen the trailer for the film about this time last year. I think I was still pregnant at the time. And then I was like, right, let's just do it. So we ordered the cargo bike, and that was just so I could continue for the same reasons, because I already knew all the positives of cycling. I just wanted to be able to still do it as a mother of two.
And it's wonderful what the one of the mums said in the film about that need for me time, and that you can, by cycling to say a toddler group or whatever activity, you get to have the me time as well as being a mum. And I think that's incredibly important. And I guess it's something we don't appreciate that much or enough.
Yeah, I think, was it Emily Finch, the lady with the 6 children who now has 7 children? She said, like, she just described it so well, that you would get up in the morning and you kind of go out on the bike and you'd be like, oh, this is a bit of a wreck. And, you know, it could be raining or whatever. And then you're cycling along and then she'd just be like, I'm so happy. And, you know, just like, yeah, like, it's exactly like that. You start off on your bike, could be lashing rain, the wind in your face or whatever. But you always feel great afterwards, and it just lifts your mood, and that stays with you for the day. And I think it's so important as well. Like, it's important for anyone, but I think especially for young moms as well, to have that outlet is really important.
I just here on Twitter, a young mum has tweeted, we're kind of having a covideo party during the virtual screening, the community screening here in Galway City. And Rose and Carl has just tweeted, just watched amazing MOTHERLOAD with my 10-month-old and my 2-year, 4-month-old and my better half. It's officially the little one's first movie. Yeah, Austin the toddler is loving all the bikes. I promised him a few. So thanks to Galway Cycling, and thanks to Galway City Council for sponsoring this, and of course to Liz in particular. And final line, I'm all for critical mass in Galway in 2020 and 2021.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. So actually that point of around being just taking everyday regular journeys, being connected to your children, being connected to your neighborhood and connected to your environment, that's a really, really strong theme throughout the documentary. And I think a question that comes up a lot for you, Liz, and for some of the mums here in the panel, is about the idea of risk and perceived risk, and the perceived benefits and the known benefits of cycling, and how some backlash is felt by young mums taking their kids out on bikes, and on unusual bicycles like a cargo bike.
So I could approach that from a few different angles. I mean, I think that backlash is sort of a separate issue from safety, because people can say mean things and be angry without actually threatening your safety. You know, I like to point out, and I don't know what it's like where you guys are, because you said to me that it's really, really, really dangerous. But generally speaking, conversations about safety and bicycle are very much informed by emotions and not by statistics. So I tried in the film to offer the possibility, I mean, that is backed up by statistics, that cycling is not as dangerous as we think it is most places. Also, I think most people assume that you'd be riding your bike the same way that you drive to get someplace. This is the route that I drive, so I would never ride, because this is a very dangerous, but there's always a different way. And you need to reach out to people and learn the alternative route. Most of the time, I mean, people used to say to me when I would ride my bike from here to San Francisco, oh, you go on the highway? You know, and there's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful route to take to get to San Francisco on your bicycle, and it's totally doable. So, yeah. And as far as bike lash, I think like there was a mom who actually was lent a cargo bike the week before we did one of these virtual screenings just to try it out. And this was a town in Colorado where there are not a lot of moms carrying children on cargo bikes. And she was doing pick up and drop off at school, and she said she felt like a weirdo. And I said, please don't stop. Just keep doing it. And every time you pass that line of cars that is sitting there with their engines on and their air conditioning on and the windows rolled up, you know, waiting to get their child, eventually you're going to start feeling, and they're going to start viewing you as the clever one. And then you're going to have a friend, and then you're going to have another friend and another friend, and then there'll be a gang of these badass women doing drop off and pickup. But you can't give up just because some people are giving you side eye. You know, that's part of being a pioneer, and the fact is you're doing it the smart way. So
yeah, and I think that's the advertisement in itself, isn't it? That the first person is the advertising for the next person. It was interesting there what you said about the routes, you know, finding out the route that is most comfortable to you. I think like Knocknacara has quite where Neasa is, there's so many cul-de-sacs that just increase the amount of time that it takes to get anywhere, like from A to B. So therefore people decide to drive, when in actual fact, if we could just knock down a couple of walls, the shortcut as the crow flies will be so much better. And those are essentially simple interventions that are not necessarily that expensive, but could have a massive impact on people choosing or seeing that cycling or walking is more convenient, or it's more competitive essentially than driving.
Similarly, in rural Ireland, we have like all these little roads that go everywhere and like have great surfaces and are really lightly trafficked, and people who drive everywhere might not appreciate that and might not realize that all of those exist. So one of the things we're trying to do in rural Ireland at the moment is trying to reclaim those as Rocha roads, which means bike road. So it means we're hoping that we can get drivers to drive at a speed that's more appropriate for sharing a road with bikes. And I think that could really start to enable more people to cycle for those everyday journeys.
Yeah, it's a great initiative, the vision for rural cycling.
Yeah, I think what you said as well, Síle, about those kind of the permeability that, you know, there are safe, quiet routes that could exist if you just knocked a wall here or there. You don't have to build massive segregated cycle routes. It's just giving the option of cycling quieter, more pleasant routes where you're not in conflict with, or not in conflict, but what else is there when you're cycling, when you have a child and you're cycling next to a huge truck. So, you know, to have those quiet ways are so important. And it's not just for people cycling, it's people who are walking or people with disabilities. It opens up public transport as well, because you're talking about even trying to get out to a bus stop, like having to walk 500 meters to get to a bus stop rather than 100 meters might be, especially if you've got limited mobility, you're immediately gonna sit into the car. But on the bike lash thing as well, like I have to say, like I haven't really experienced it at all with the cargo bike. I think there's that novelty thing with cargo bike in Galway still, that and I suppose I haven't really been in commuter traffic. I haven't been in the rat race, the morning rat race, since we got the bike.
Actually, about the bike, Neasa, tell us how your cargo bike came about.
So as I said, I saw the trailer. So we kind of I knew about cargo bikes because, you know, you'd see them on Twitter and stuff and you'd be like, oh, that's a great idea kind of thing. And then I remember was looking at a different family on Twitter. I think it's Family Bicycle, and there was a couple other people on Twitter. I think there's Orla Burke down in Cork, and there was Una Morrison up in Dublin. And you see these other mothers, and you're like, might do that. And then I saw the trailer for the movie, as I said, and it was just like, you just felt the joy of it, and you're like, that's what I need, you know. So we'd kind of decided at that stage we were going to get a cargo bike. When the lockdown happened, then we were like, right, there can't be a better time to buy a cargo bike. And while we were waiting for the cargo bike was the first time I watched the film, and I was just so excited. And I watched it again today, and now it's lovely watching it, having experienced the cargo bike life now. Like, so much more resonates in the film now. I understand that kind of freedom and the power that you feel, that you're like bringing your whole family around with you, and you're shopping, and a duvet, and you know, you've got all this stuff in your bike, and you're bringing it home on your own with the electric assist. But sure,
that's all right. That's all right.
That's okay.
Joe, tell us about your cargo bike.
So we got it about 3 years ago when my little one was 18 months old. So, and we got it at the same time as we moved 10k outside of the nearest town. And I was also, because I'm really into kind of building communities and supporting community groups, I was also running the local breastfeeding support group at the time, and 2 other toddler groups. So it meant that 3 times a week, me and my little one had to pedal into town to do these things. But yeah, and that's why I think that me time really resonated with me, because that was so important for me. Like, bringing her to the toddler group was great for her, but for me to be able to cycle to do that was amazing. And really, because it is a very lonely time, that becoming a mother. And I loved how you shared that real kind of raw emotional, like that honesty of that kind of time of being a mum of a very young baby. And so these things are really important then, having those networks, but also having the me time to get you there is amazing.
Yeah. I remember the sensation of like when everything was packed, I had all the wipes and all the snacks, and they were actually buckled in, and I could actually take off. That's like a high right there. Just, here we go. Yeah.
And I think what I've found as well is my 10-month-old will kick and scream going into the car. She hates going into the car seat. But like the same car seat, I have it clicked in, like it's the same car seat I use for the cargo bike. It's clicked into the cargo bike, and her little legs are kicking with joy when I put her in. Like, she's just like, she's the same way, she's like, let's go. And you know, she loves kicking her little brother's head the odd time as well, or her big brother's head. So he wears a helmet in the cargo bike, but it's more to protect him from her than from any other impact. So.
Oh, that's a gorgeous anecdote. Fair play. Yes, Síle, come in.
Yeah, no, I just had a question for Liz on the footage from the guy, sorry, I don't have his name from the documentary, who was working and living in Gambia. And it struck me that, like, we're obviously very privileged in that it's a choice to cycle and use our bikes to get around. Where it very much showed how it was a necessity there, and to move around like charcoal or whatever. But I was just wondering, so people submitted footage to you in the course of putting together the documentary, and I was wondering at what stage that footage came in, or your reaction to it. Like, did you actively look for it, or did it arrive into your inbox, and what was your reaction when you saw that? Because it's obviously very different culturally, and yeah.
I was really excited. I thought, I couldn't believe that this guy had the time and the energy to do this. And of course, at that point, I asked him for more. You know, can you show me this? Can you show me that? Can you shoot an interview with yourself describing your situation. And it was so cool because, as I said in the film, he had to ride his bike to, you know, to get someplace where he could upload everything. And, you know, what was even cooler is recently I did one of these with Shasta Living Streets. So Shasta, California is north of here. And he and his family, they're basically missionaries, and they were taking a break from their missionary work and living in Shasta. So he was on the panel with me, which was really, really neat. And he's hoping to create some sort of factory there in Gambia where they can build these bikes. He's still working on that.
Yeah, it kind of tied in nicely then with, I guess, when the wildfires happened and that the cargo bikes then came into their own. You know, there was a real parallel in a way that it helped with resilience. It was nearly back to basics.
Yeah. We've kept our Bullet. That's the box bike that I had, in addition to the long tail, because we have this dog and we have, you know, stuff that we're going to want to get out, because we live in a canyon. Around here, there's just loads and loads of these long, mostly dead-end roads. And it's going to be, even though there's every year they get a more sophisticated plan for evacuating, and they don't recommend bikes still here, because there's a possibility that you'll be, you know, traveling through actual fire. But I mean, the traffic is going to be a nightmare. So we've hung on to both bikes for that reason.
And as you've already had just very recently an experience where you've had to evacuate.
Yeah, actually, we didn't have an evacuation order here because the closest fire to us was still pretty small and 10 miles away. There were evacuation orders a little bit closer to the fire, but we were in danger of getting an evacuation order any day, and the air was toxic. So I took my kids and we went to my mom's house on the East Coast, but basically for a month, my husband stayed here with our dog and with 2 air filters inside the house, most days unable to go outside. The air quality, you know, kept on changing, and that's the second time that we've had to leave this area just because of smoke from other fires all over California. You know, you guys have all seen in the news how it's pretty much been on fire. Yeah, so it's breaking my heart to think that we may have to leave here because we can't do this every year. It's just going to get worse.
I don't want to be flippant, but when I say you're welcome to the west coast of Ireland anytime.
Thank
With
you.
that lovely fresh Atlantic wind coming in.
I think that was,
you know, honestly, it does feel like a great time to leave this country.
yeah. I think that was another thing though, Liz, the kind of the motivation to cycle as well. Like there is that kind of feeling of freedom and empowerment and everything, but then at the back of your head, you still have this, you talked about being conflicted, like having children and knowing what direction the world is going in, and it all, in some small way, it feels like we're doing something right by choosing the bike.
That was a big part of why I wanted to make the film, because nowadays they tell us you put plastic in recycling and it doesn't get recycled. I mean, there's so many things, because so much of what causes climate change is systemic, like it's built into our everyday lives. It is very hard not to be contributing to it every day with most things that we do. But getting on the bike, it just feels so right in every way. It just feels like this is what we're supposed to be doing. There's very little about it that's a compromise, you know?
And do you think, Liz, that because the effects are more drastic over the last couple of years, you know, the floods in Houston and more hurricanes and more severe weather events, has that filtered through in the general population? And you know what, I'm just going to stop there, because it isn't actually just about individuals. It is actually about systemic, and that's very difficult when you have a corrupt administration and a politicized judiciary. So it's not, it is a systemic issue. So, but I just wonder, in your advocacy work, do you see you know, is that helping change people's minds about adopting a kind of a more environmentally friendly way of living?
I think that more people probably consider a bike, but I chose, for instance, in the film to really focus on the joy, because it made sense to me when Ross Evans, who's also in the film, who's a very brilliant, inspirational guy himself, he said to me that a professor once told him that people buy things or make life changes for emotional reasons, and they rationalize them for intellectual reasons. So like you could say the environmental movement has a big problem with that, because it's very much about you're bad, don't do this, you need to cut back, all this stuff. But I felt lucky that here's something I can present that is wonderful for the world, but I'm going to present it purely on the basis of how good it feels.
And was that a conscious choice? Sorry, now I mustn't lose question. So the soundtrack is very upbeat, even when you're talking about quite poignant aspects of it. And I was wondering, was that intentional for the same reasons you've just outlined?
I think that the salient point of the film is how much joy this brings to us. And then there's all these other cascading, you know, byproducts of the experience that are wonderful. But I wanted to just sell it on the basis of how much fun it is.
And Liz, can I ask you a question about how will you kind of define the success of this film? Is it that you've inspired people like Neasa to cycle? Is it that you've won awards, or is it something more than that?
I wish that I'd been keeping better track of, you know, all the transformational stories that I've been told. That is really satisfying. I was hoping when the shutdown happened that I would see new people trying riding, and in this safety of, you know, these open streets that were happening everywhere and all this pop-up infrastructure, and that perhaps the film could intersect with that and get people to be more organized to the point where when the cars come back, they would say, no, I'm not going to let this go. We are not going to lose this extra space, this sharing of public space for bikes. And I don't know if that's happening. You guys would probably know better than me. It's been a little distressing to see, you know, there was so much talk in the beginning of shutdown about this being the Great Reset, and we're going to learn all these lessons from it. And in this country anyway, it just feels like things have just gotten worse. So I don't know if what we're taking away, you know.
I don't think things necessarily have gotten worse here in Ireland. There's definitely some parts of the country that are doing a lot better and are being ambitious and reactive and responsive and are really taking a trial and error attitude. Shout out to Neasa County Council and to anybody here from Neasa who are joining us this evening. And the rest of us around the country are looking at you in wild jealousy and delight, but a lot of jealousy. Yeah.
Ennis as well.
Ennis, absolutely. Sheila, tell us what's happening in Ennis.
I think we were very lucky with our Director of Service in the Clare County Council, Carmel Kirby. So, Liz, our restrictions came in March, St. Patrick's Day. The schools were, and it was actually announced that they were closing. And the restrictions got obviously stronger, and a lot of them were, we were restricted to 2 kilometers radius of our homes, and then eventually it was 5 kilometers. So it was actually back in May that they introduced, even though essentially the town was deserted and businesses were closed, we were very lucky in that Clare County Council said, okay, well, we're going to start a mobility plan while things are closed. And so they filtered through traffic, because we've quite it's very old town. So the streets are very narrow and there wouldn't have been any space for physical distancing. So they took out the cars so that people could literally queue outside shops and have more space in the footpaths. And it's worked very well. Now, there has been obviously pushback, but it's from a minority, very loud minority, and the community traders. It's very understandable that traders are extremely worried because, of course, we're in a recession and we're in a pandemic and cash flow is going to be an issue for people. But in general, the community are very positive about it, and we've heard great things from a lot of the traders. And what's wonderful is that when you see outdoor space being used by small little coffee shops and expanding out onto the public street, that in itself creates a vibrancy. Now, it's not without its difficulties in that I think we need to kind of push ahead and look at reducing traffic congestion coming into the town, which has always been a problem. It's nothing new here. So we need to be looking at walking and cycling infrastructure from about 10 or 15 minutes out. But overall, we've been lucky. The political will was there to do it and to be brave about it and to kind of hold it when there was reaction and go, look, let's bed it down, let's evaluate it. And I think the most successful projects around Ireland, and actually, Liz, there was national guidelines from national government to say people walk and cycle, the capacity will be reduced in public transport. It's really important, and that was WHO advice, for people to go out and walk and cycle to keep their physical and mental health, and also because they couldn't take public transport. So the guidelines from international health, the guidelines from national health, NEFIT, and from the NTA, which would be the National Transport Authority, were all aligned that not only did individuals have to walk and cycle, but there needed to be a systematic approach, and local authorities needed to enable people to walk and cycle. But that's been very inconsistent across the country. So we would hope to see more local authorities really be brave and say, okay, let's try this out, evaluate it, let's improve it and iterate it. Yeah.
I think this speaks to the point around emotion and evidence in that, and engineering. So in terms of advocacy for safer walking and cycling facilities, like, we all know the engineering solutions. Like, we know how to build a spaceship, so to speak. It's the empathy, it's the heart, it's a political will. You know, it's the emotional side of things that we need to advocate. I think that is one of the strongest things that comes out of your film, Liz, is the sense of joy and why can't we feel like this all the time? This is just so wonderful. Why don't more people experience this?
And I think the important thing about this film as well is probably a narrative that has gone on in this country as well, is that cycling is for middle-aged, middle-class men. And I think that was the important thing I found in the film, is like, these are women, and these are women with children, their families, their fathers, they're everybody of all shapes and sizes, all ethnicities, from all different backgrounds. And there's just, I think there's a latent demand there for cycling that people don't realize. You know, I play a kind of a soccer with a load of mammies as well on a Wednesday night, and they're like, why hasn't, they're asking me, even though they're not involved in cycling advocacy, and they're like, why isn't there a cycle lane on the prom? Like, what's happening? And I was like, well, you need to speak up and let your voice be heard on this, because all there is, you know, otherwise it's just a group of kind of contrarians shouting for infrastructure. They need to hear the voices of parents that are calling for this infrastructure for their children. I think it's, but anyway.
Joe, this is something you're really leading on in terms of rural Ireland, and you just co-authored this week the launch of a vision for rural Ireland through the National Cycling Advocacy Network, cyclist.ie. Tell us a little bit about that.
So there was a group of us in rural Ireland who got together to put this vision together, and in it we've got 8 clear asks to put to our government, and they kind of go into 2 broad categories. One is about changing the way things are done, so moving from a really ad hoc approach to a much more strategic approach, and that's primarily like having a plan so that we know where the routes are going to go, and so that we can spend money wisely, and so that we have the time to design things properly. And then it's also about changing the environments on our roads, so reducing speed limits, making safer routes to schools, and doing cycle training for everyone. And the key thing is about cyclists being expected and respected on our roads. So it's changing the social environment as well as the physical environment. And that's about the whole cultural change, which is a massive shift. But I think the government have a huge role to play in that, like that. If they are shown to be taking cycling seriously by creating these strategic plans, then other people will start to take it seriously and see cyclists as like legitimate road users rather than just a nuisance. So we really need government to act on this, and to act now, because we need to see change happen now.
Absolutely. There's no more time to be wasted or waiting around. And I guess that's one of the very exciting things about our new government here and the programme for government, that there is a commitment to spend 360 million euros next year on safe cycling and walking infrastructure, equivalent to 20% of the land transport budget last year, which is extraordinary development for Ireland, that we will have about €1 million a day to spend to make it easier and safer for everybody everywhere to walk or cycle. And so we really, as cycling advocates and mobility and safe infrastructure advocates, really want an emphasis on quality infrastructure, on connected infrastructure. So this ad hoc, a little bit here and a little bit there, or disappears as you enter the roundabout or the junction where it's the most dangerous, the most tricky, the most anxiety inducing, that we really should be able to move from our front door to wherever we need to go within our community, to the local shop, to the school, to the butcher, the baker, even like our commutes to work for those of us who are going to a physically different workplace from our own homes. That cycling and walking, scooting, wheeling should be a safe and real option for adults of all ages and abilities, and for children of all ages and abilities. And you were talking there, Joe, about culture, and it's really stuck around this through the film, the idea of the cultural presumption where as children we enjoy playing on 2 wheels, and then we graduate to being grown-ups and we move to 4, and that is not necessarily what's appropriate anymore, if it ever was to begin with. So Liz, can you talk to us a bit about like the culture of a life on 2 wheels or 3 as adults that we can embrace and enjoy?
Sure. I think it's a huge thing, the shift that we need to make from viewing it as a toy to viewing it as a tool. You know, in this country, it's mostly a recreational thing, and the outfit that people wear of Lycra and sunglasses and is pretty alienating. Michael Colville-Anderson likes to say that in Copenhagen, they don't have bike culture, they have vacuum cleaner culture, right? So everybody has one, everybody uses one every day, they don't polish them, they don't have a stable of vacuums, they don't wave to other vacuum cleaner enthusiasts. It's a tool. And so, for instance, like in the film, when I did the portrait of the New Wheel bicycle shop towards the end of the film, I think of them as cutting edge, you know, the bicycle shop of the future, because they treat this purchase as a car replacement. It is about reliability. It's about safety, and it's not about how cool you're going to look on your bicycle. And it's about financing. It's about treating this, you know, like an investment in your family's future. So,
and they were enabling people as well. I think that was what I loved about it's Karen Wiener, is it? So I loved how, you know, you pointed out how expensive it would be, like with the electric assist, and the idea of being able to trade in your car for a cargo bike. And it was funny because I recognized Karen then. That was another one of the things I'd watched before I bought the cargo bike, was Karen and her partner did a kind of a review of the Load 75, which was the bike that we got. But she spoke about the bike in a different way. It wasn't like all the other reviews were done by men, whereas when Karen did it, she pointed out like how the handles could be adjusted, and that after having her baby, you know, she didn't want to have pressure on her abdomen, and she's just, you know, it was just the practicality of how they sell their bikes as well, I suppose. And then it was lovely to see then the other, she had another string to her bow, that, you know, the financing and making it easier for people from lower incomes to buy into this way of life as well was lovely to see.
Right. I mean, there's a lot of people that think of cargo bikes as a toy for rich people, but when you think about it as a car, it's a pretty great deal.
Yeah.
I'm just going to, there's a lot of questions coming in here in the Q&A. I'm going to put a few kind of quick fire questions to Liz and the panel, so jump in if you'd like. Here is one. Have you ever had any experience on longer journeys using the cargo bikes in conjunction with public transport? Neasa? Yep.
Sorry. An adventure this summer. We took the cargo bike on the train to Gort, and then we cycled down to the Burn Lowlands, and then we poodled around there for a few days. So that was our first and only experience of public transport so far, but it was very smooth. It was brilliant. I think it was 20 quid for the whole lot of us, the baby, the toddler, or the 3-year-old, and myself and Neil, and the cargo bike. Just pushed it onto the train along with Neil's bike, and it was fantastic. It was great, tearing around the Burn on a cargo bike. I've got brilliant photos as well, so I'll throw a few up on Twitter.
A better place to be.
Yeah. Oh yeah, County Clare, there you go.
Good stuff. Another question here, slightly different tack, but on cycling advocacy, and I should say welcome to our friends from across the waters in the UK for joining us this evening. What would the panelists say is the best way to drive engagement to build a cycling community in a small town? And a small town in UK sizes is 40,000 people, which might be a big town here in Ireland. And Tom is saying, I think we'd get more people involved if we started doing more social events, and obviously that's a little bit tricky at the moment. So, are there any particular thoughts or advice on creating a cycling community, cycling network in towns?
Just my advice would be to really focus on the kind of celebrating the whole bike, this culture around it as well, and making it really positive. So steering away from the kind of attacking the council for not doing X or Y, but focusing on what has been done and what's good and what more could be done, and possibly even creating a vision for the town, because a vision is always really inspiring, and it can really motivate other people to get involved if they can see where it is you want to go.
Absolutely. Go on, Síle.
Yeah, so when we set up Better Ennis, yeah, we're a small town as well, Tom, except smaller than you, about 25,000. So we decided, rather than to focus solely on a mode of transport, that it will be, I know the name is Better Ennis, that it will be, because things are so interconnected. So for example, walking, cycling, air quality, accessibility, age friendliness, that it will be around the kind of idea of healthy streets and again, physical, mental, social health. So that it doesn't necessarily alienate anyone, and that people can actually come together from their own different angle. Because I always think, like, if we could all organize, there's so many people on the same wavelength and in loads of different sectors, and coming to it from the same place, or coming to the same destination from different places, that I think there's value in looking slightly wider. Now, everyone will know their own town the best, and also we wouldn't have had the numbers to have all these separate groups. But because there's so much overlap in the objectives of what people are aiming for, I think, yeah, maybe, actually Brian Deegan talks about this in Manchester, about when he's trying to get a project through, he stopped using the word cycling because there was an automatic reaction to it. So now he talks about active travel and mobility, and I think there's value in that. You know, language is so important. Yeah, so that's my own tuppence worth.
And tuppence from me here, Tom. This summer, after lockdown lifted here in Ireland, we in the Galway Cycling Campaign started a little series of social cycling events called Cycle, Coffee, Cake. And the name of the event should tell you what it's all about. Go for a little bit of a cycle and have a coffee and cake. So it's a huge emphasis on the sociability of cycling, and particularly targeted at adult women who were new to cycling during lockdown, or returned to cycling after years or even decades, and who need some confidence to stay on the bike. So we go for maybe 8 to 10 kilometer routes through our city, different neighbourhood each time, and going back to our conversation earlier, showing people alternate routes through our hometown. So you would know how to get from A to B in a car or on a bus, but actually from a bike you can go a different way. Here's some shortcuts, here's some cut through housing estates, and then ending at a cafe that has space outside and maybe a good quality bike rack, and spending about an hour on the bike and an hour with the chats, the coffee, and something sweet and something kind of a treat to eat at the end. And that's been a really great way to get people, and particularly women, thinking about staying on the bike. And we've had people turn up who go on cycling holidays but have never cycled into the city centre before. So that's been really great. Yeah,
I think it's nice as well just to have that positive, a real life positive experience, because you can end up being a talking shop otherwise, as a cycling advocacy group. And it was the same with the cycle bus. I think a couple of years ago we were probably in a bit of a funk. We were just like, nothing was happening. It was like banging our heads off a wall. But every morning we were doing something really positive. So this was the one thing that we were saying, right, look, at least we have the cycle bus. At least this is going well. At least we've got a model here that we can develop. So I think it's important to have the likes of the cycle coffee cake or cycle bus to have engagement, I suppose, with the community, and just to have something positive to actually be doing something rather than talking about we want this or we want that.
Yeah, and I think you know, if you do a cyclability audit or walkability audit with people who aren't necessarily even used to them, it just makes people, when you're doing the walkabout or cyclabout, it just opens people's eyes. It's not that they're you know, they're not hostile to thinking about it, but as you move around, it really makes people aware of their environment, and they can see the potential. They can, not just the joy of cycling, and not just what's wrong with their urban environment, but also what's good about it and what can be improved really easily. So that physical, as like Neasa was saying there, it's not just a talking shop, but actually going out and experiencing your own environment is massively influential.
Joe, you want to come in there as well?
I was just going to say the other piece of advice is to just do it. Organize an event, see who turns up. You might be surprised. And then work on that group's strengths, then find out what you're interested in. You might not have kids in a school, so obviously a cycle bus isn't going to be what you do, but find out what you like doing and then just do that, and it'll grow.
That's great advice. I actually myself was out last weekend and again today with the Athenry cycling group, Wheels of Athenry. It's a town of about 5,000 people. It's a commuter town of Galway city. Last weekend they held a pedal parade through the town. In a town of 5,000 people, over 60 turned up. Tons of small children cycling like a loop or two loops around the town. So that'd be equivalent in Galway. Our population is 80,000. The same amount of 1,000 people came out in Galway for a cycle. So like really significant numbers. And again today then they had a cycle from Athenry to Craughwell. Beautiful 14k through gorgeous country roads, fabulous proper boreen, through woodlands, and ended at a family establishment where they served some drink and some food, and then we all got the train back to where we were going to again. So yeah, so as people say, like, you know, pick some sort of social activity and just go for it. People will show up. People love going to things that are organized by others. I'm close now. We've been chatting for nearly an hour. I just want one or two kind of topics to talk about. We've talked a lot about parenting and women and women's bodies, women's empowerment, and we have here kind of quite friendly faces, two dads, Liam and Kevin from Galway Cycling Campaign. So they're not going to join the conversation per se, but just to talk about, this is something that came up in the documentary, was dads and their experience of cycling, and again connecting to a point Neasa made about people, that cycling isn't just for rich people, and that you can have a cargo bike and have a lower income and still have a really high quality of life. I think that's something that really came strongly in your film, Liz.
Is that a question, Martina?
It's the most awful thing. It's like, it's not more a question, it's more of a comment, really. Actually, Kevin, do you want to come in on this? Since you can unmute you there.
No, he's hiding.
I'll unmute you, Kevin.
My audio went, Martina. Was there a question for me?
I was going to say, dads on bikes. You've just been watching the film with your family.
Mm-hmm. Half of it. And then we put them up to bed. It was a great cinema experience, I was just saying to Liz. Yeah, the children are being militarized by watching this film, I think. So
I think one of the lines from one of the dads on the freeway, I'm thinking of you and Neil, I suppose, my own husband, with this, is he said, one of the dads says, you never imagine like somebody driving on the freeway and saying, yes, I'm on the freeway. Whereas, like, you know, you're cycling up the back roads there. Like, I met you the last morning, you were just like, wow. You know, you don't do that when you see somebody in a car.
I should say I saw Neasa going up a hill faster than I was coming down it. The it's fabulous. I don't know. I mean, I do see people singing in the car and stuff like that. So maybe there is a little joy in that kind of cocoon. But I love singing on the bike and stuff. So, and I think the kids do too. I don't know. There's something, the sense of community that came across in the start of the film. Now, I'm not a mother, but I mean, I'm aware of, you know, this kind of isolation you can get in motherhood. And in fact, even post-lockdown, I think a lot of us feel this isolation in terms of talking to other people. I see it with parents at the school gate. And one of the things during lockdown, there's been a virtual sense of community. But when you're on a bike, there is this kind of, I don't know, maybe dog owners have the same thing, but you know, you have this sort of friendliness or this, I don't know, bond that you feel with people irrationally. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it's social clumsiness or something, but I love meeting people on bikes, especially when they've kind of funny looking bikes. I don't know, I just feel I like them immediately.
Do you find yourself smiling inanely at people on bikes, even when you're not, and they have no idea why you're smiling at them?
I think I might, but there could be other reasons for that. Yeah.
I was cycling down Kappa Road the last day, and my little boy's preschool is up a kind of little rural road, and I was cycling down. They were having the actual main school was having some kind of cycling initiative that day. So there was like parents cycling to school with their children, but I was just like, I'm sure they thought I was daft as a brush. I was just like, well done, everyone, you know, I'm cycling down the hill and they're out on a really cold kind of windy morning. And I was just like, well done. I'd say, like, I hope they, you know, give them a little boost anyway.
Well, I was cycling down a hill somewhere at the back of Athenry earlier today, and down a hill, and it was like with a bunch of adults and children, and I did lift the two legs off the pedals and just went, whee! And it was the most fun I've had on my bike in ages. It was great crack.
Can I say as well, just one like before we finish up, it was probably one of the most towards the end of the film for me, having two children as well, was the moment where you were waving your own two children off and they were cycling off independently. It was like I had a little bit of a moment. How were they doing? Are they still cycling off to school on their own, or?
Yeah, if they were going to school. I mean, you know, school is entirely remote right now. But my boy especially is really, you know, we live where mountain biking was invented. We have wonderful trails, and he's beating his dad up and down the hills and become really skilled and really passionate about it. When I talk about moving to the East Coast, that's the one thing he said, that we're not leaving here. I'm going to be a mountain biker. So yeah, they're pretty independent, and I think it has definitely informed their relationship to our community. You know, they have a different sense of where we live because they have grown up always exploring it on a bike. Yeah.
Good stuff. Listen, before I kind of ask all of our guests to kind of a final comment, question, takeaway, highlight, just one final question from the audience, and this does not surprise me at all, is how to go about hosting your own online screening of MOTHERLOAD. Because we got this idea from Clonakilty Bike Fest, hosted MOTHERLOAD in June. It was hosted by the Cork Environmental Forum earlier this week. We're hosting it today, and now like this lovely virtuous cycle that you've kicked off, Liz. So there's a question from Peter, who's wondering how can he go about making this happen in his own community.
Oh, excellent. So our website is motherloadmovie.com, and there's a lot of information there about purchasing a screening license, either for a virtual event or for if you're in a place where it's safe enough to do some sort of live event. And people now are doing a lot of outdoor events if the weather is good where you are, bike-in movies and things like that that allow for social distance. And you can reach me at info@motherloadmovie.com. And I think it was pretty easy, right, Martina? It's not a hard thing to do. Yeah.
So easy. Liz is really responsive. It's fast. Is really responsive. There's so much information. There's actually a whole like press kit with all the information that you need. Loads of images, video. I mean, it could not be easier. Highly recommend it. So before I kind of close off formally this evening, I want to just kind of go around the house again to Neasa, Síle and Joe for your key, takeaway, lesson, impression. What has this all meant to you, Motherload, and in context, I guess, of Bike Week 2020?
I think one of the key things that Liz spoke about was she talked about connection and balance and on the bike, so that it can have two different meanings, I suppose, when you're thinking about cycling. But I think that was the main thing, that with the cycle bus and with me on the cargo bike cycling with my family, that's the main thing, is making connection again with your community, with your surroundings, with your environment, with the world, and then just that balance for yourself. I think it just gives you that little bit of time for yourself and that wee bit of joy in the day, even if it's just cycling down to buy the groceries. It makes it a little bit more joyous, I think. So I just feel once I've been out in the cargo bike and I've done even a little basic task like that, I'm like, well, I've done that, and I've done it myself on the bike.
Oh, that's gorgeous. Thanks, Neasa. Síle, how about you?
Yeah, so I loved the journey of the documentary, the way it went from your own individual challenges, Liz, to looking for, I guess, your own individual connection, and then it kind of grew into this social movement, and then it progressed, the critical mass into advocacy for infrastructure. And I guess, like, we're in a global pandemic, and I'm not, and we're, everyone is struggling in every different country. We're not unaware of the catastrophic effects of the pandemic in the US, and that you're going through such an extremely difficult time at the moment, that it's so, I guess I wish you very well. I wish you all well, because the importance of that social cohesion and community building will be the thing that will see through. So yeah, fantastic work.
Thank you.
And Joe?
I guess I used to work as a transport planner, and I specialized in cycling, and I always kind of focused on the air pollution and congestion and traffic management and all of that side of it. And it was wonderful in this film to see the kind of articulation of the emotional side of it. And I wonder whether, like Martina was talking about, kind of looking more at how we can use empathy. And I wonder if we can go a little bit further than that and kind of harness that kind of the power of love around cycling and all that it does to us, like the love of our bodies and the love of our health and of our communities and of the planet, and whether we can really build on that to kind of change things. So thanks for articulating that.
Lovely. Thank you, Joe.
I guess for me, Liz, I was really struck by the aspect of social history, and and resonance is that things change and things remain the same. So that when the bicycle was invented, it became this tool for mass mobilization of people, different kinds of people, and real tool in the emancipation of women. And here we are 120, 130-ish years later, and it's still doing that, or it's also doing that in a new way again. So the social history, the connection into the movement for mobility for all and for women's emancipation really resonated well with me. So thank you so much for that. Liz, do you have any kind of any thoughts for us? Anything you'd like to leave us with?
You just reminded me of the final quote from Rebecca Solnit at the film, which I've been thinking a lot about lately in the context of Black Lives Matter, and even the conflict around masks in this country and stuff. Small things, small actions. I mean, riding your bike to the corner store in flip-flops and a skirt, you know, you're normalizing, you're humanizing, and it's important, these tiny little things. And that's how cultural change happens, just more and more people doing that. So.
And as Margaret Mead said, be the change you want to be in the world. It's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm going to bring this webinar, this Q&A panel discussion to a conclusion right now. So my thanks on behalf of Galway Cycling Campaign to Liz Canning, Director of MOTHERLOAD, for the wonderful opportunity to talk everything about the love and joy of cycling, and to our guests, our contributors here, Neasa Bheilbigh, co-founder of the Galway Cycle Bus, Síle Ginnane, co-founder of Better Ennis, and Joe Sachs-Elderidge, organiser of the Leitrim Cycling Festival and co-author of A Vision for Cycling in Rural Ireland by the Rural Cycling Collective. This webinar will be available on our YouTube channel and on our website, galwaycycling.org. This has been an event as part of Bike Week 2020, funded by Galway County Council through the Government of Ireland